Singapore was the second country in the world where attacks were coming from. I have to pause for the emphasis there because it's not a target, it's the source.
Today's guest is Joseph Yap, founder of Otonata. With over 2 decades optimizing corporate operations and supply chain, Joseph now helps individuals protect the one place they never expected to be vulnerable, their homes.
Let's understand why. Why Singapore?
Since the 80s, the Singapore government has been very actively promoting information technology. Everyone has multiple devices, washing machines, you've got fridges, robot vacuums, security cameras. The attack surface is just going to keep growing. For low-income households, you get high-speed fiber access. So there's a term that really disturbs me now. It's called residential proxy. The hackers are using people's houses and monetizing them. One of my friends was very proud that he bought a media player from a very small shop that was $50, but you could access everything. It reminded me of a quote that if you can't work out what the product is, you are the product. You are the proxy. You are the service. They're selling access to your network.
Are you now saying that we are all being hacked?
Probably, yeah. If I looked at the statistics now, botnet, they counted over 700,000 devices attacking at the same time. It hit 30 terabits per second. It's like downloading all of Netflix within minutes. AI, the barrier to entry for hacking now is super low. Some of the best known ransomware gangs are run by teenagers. You can ask ChatGPT, you can ask Gemini, you can ask Claude. If someone broke into the home network, it's like they have access to your house, but you don't know that they're there. It's very freaky if someone is standing behind you, but you don't know them, and they're there 24/7, watching everything that you do.
Hey, quick pause. My goal with Tech Lead Journal is simple. Learn from the best in tech so we can all grow together. If this resonates with you, hit subscribe to follow the channel. It's the biggest way for you to support the show and help us keep bringing great guests and insights to you. Thanks for being here, and let's get back to it. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back to another in-person podcast recording. Today I have with me Joseph Yap. He's gonna share something very interesting today about cybersecurity. But we are not going to talk about cybersecurity as you may have heard it a lot of times, with organizations and things like that. But this is actually at your personal home or your personal usage. So there are some statistics that I think kind of like mind-blowing to me when he first shared it with me. So yeah, I think let's just discuss it later. So welcome, Joseph, to the show.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
So Joseph, in the beginning, I always love to maybe invite my guests, share a little bit about your career, especially the turning points that you think we all can learn from you.
Okay. So I started very much in communications and journalism, actually. My initial background academically was more about journalism interviewing, being on the other side of the table. I've changed career paths quite a bit along the way, but I found that for every change that I made, there was always something that I had learned before that I could leverage into a new role. So in terms of turning points, I think changing career paths and finding that actually there's stuff I can carry over from a previous role was quite helpful. I've also found that over the 20 plus years of corporate life, one of the biggest learnings that I had was thinking about people. It's funny to say this out loud, but in the space that I've been, which is really to do with operations and supply chain, we often forget that businesses are run by people, organizations are run by people. My expertise and familiarity has been with processes and trying to simplify and stabilize things. But unfortunately, if you don't think about the people aspect of that, things will always go wrong, right? So one of the big lessons that I had were from a corporate career has always been to do with people. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I had in my last 10 years or so was dealing with complexity. So going back to what I said about people, when you're not managing processes, we're thinking about people and how much effort it can take someone to make a lot of micro decisions, how much fatigue that can put someone through. I had an example where someone I worked with, she would wake up in a panic at 3 a.m. in the morning to write something down because while she was thinking about something, going to sleep, she fell asleep. And then she suddenly remembered that, oh my God, I need to do this tomorrow morning. And then she couldn't go back to sleep. So the process that they were working with was so complicated that there was so much burden on people to take the responsibility onto themselves. So one of the lessons that I had from corporate world was we have to work out how to make it easier for people not to deal with so much complexity and put the burden on themselves. So when I think about developing processes now, a lot of it is around, one, what is the value add, and two, how do I minimize the ability for human error, for something to go wrong because of that. Yeah.
Before we continue, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Cyberhaven. AI is exfiltrating your data in fragments, not one big breach. A prompt here, a screenshot there, a quiet export into a shadow AI tool. Every week, AI makes your team faster and your data harder to see. Files are moved to new SaaS apps. Models are trained on sensitive inputs, and legacy DLP is blind to the context that matters most. On February 3rd at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, Cyberhaven is unveiling a unified DSPM and DLP platform built on the original data lineage, so security teams get X-ray vision into how data actually moves and can stop risky usage in real time. Watch the launch live at cyberhaven.com/techleadjournal. That's cyberhaven.com/techleadjournal. And now, let's get back to our episode.
Well, thank you for sharing the story. I think sometimes we didn't realize at work, right? We are so maybe stressful, anxious, right? Thinking about what we need to do for work. And sometimes we just think it is like something, like a habit or something normal. But I guess the onus is for the leaders to actually think how to improve the process, not to make people's life harder, I guess. And I like actually that you said that you have switched career path multiple times. Maybe one thing that piqued my interest is like you said you started from journalism. Is there any skill that from journalism that you take on and on in other multiple careers as well?
I wouldn't say necessarily a skill, but a desire to be curious and to learn. So I've taken on several roles where I knew nothing about the role when I first took it up. I mean, I give you an example. I led a procurement function for a while in a construction company. Never worked in construction. I did procurement before, but I ended up becoming the lead for timber in construction. Didn't know anything about timber, didn't know anything about construction, but it was really interesting to me. And I dove really deep into that subject matter. Within 2 years, I became the company's subject matter expert in timber. And not only that, I helped the company win the Forest Stewardship Council Builder of the Year award. So they went from not being on the radar to being the best known builder for a green timber. So I found that being a journalist gave me the skills to ask why and to be curious and learn about something, so that when down the path, other career paths that I took, I had the skills and the interest to chase the story down and ask why. Why is it like this, and be curious about it. So I think journalism helped me develop a few tool sets to be able to talk to people, to be curious about what they do and why.
Yeah, I find asking good questions, knowing the why seems simple, right? We think it's stupid, like you come up with a lot of questions, but actually there's a lot of insights just by coming up with the questions. And I learn a lot by interviewing people, right? Even in your preparation, thinking of what good questions you would ask for the guests. I think it's also very difficult. And good conversations will start from the curiosity that you mentioned, right? The questions that you ask.
Completely agree.
Mm-hmm. So let's just dive into the topics that we want to discuss today, right? So I think in the first place, you want to share something about Singapore's state of cybersecurity. I think this is also coming from a report by Cloudflare, and it mentioned that Singapore is one of the top most DDoS attack sources country in the world. So tell us a little bit more about this mind-blowing statistics.
So I think I have to pause for the emphasis there, because it's not a target, it's the source.
Yeah.
And I found this super interesting because when it first came on my radar, Singapore was among the top 10, firstly, and then slowly increasing. I think it was earlier this year, Singapore was the second country in the world where attacks were coming from. So it's not attacks to. I mean, you hear a lot in the media about, cybercrime, scams. Singapore lost $1 billion last year to scams. But you never hear about Singapore being a source of cyber attacks. You hear about Myanmar, Cambodia, the Golden Triangle, where all the scam centers are. So when I first came across that information from Cloudflare, and keep in mind, it's not just their report about it, it's actually, they have the data and the breakdown, the stats, right? So when I first looked at that and I dug into it, the number one country in the world was, at that point, Indonesia, and then Singapore was number 2. But, Indonesia is a much bigger country, much bigger population. Okay, Singapore is a lot smaller, but when you look at the breakdown of where the attacks were coming from, the number one source at the point in time was DigitalOcean, which is hosting VMs, a lot of servers. Singapore has a lot of digitalized services, so I get that. Yeah. But then you look further down the track, it's Singtel, and then it's StarHub. And this is where people's internet connections are. And what that occurred to me was actually, it's not one specific part of Singapore that where the attacks are coming from, it's across the entire trench. So that was earlier this year. I looked up the statistics for the last 6 months. Effectively, in the top, I believe it's top 6 in the last 6 months, between Indonesia, Singapore, and Vietnam, 20% of attacks are coming from these 3 countries. Wow. And when you think about proportion versus the rest of the world, sources of attack, Singapore rates above China. You look at the amount of technology that's in China versus in Singapore and the size, but the attacks are coming from Singapore. I thought, this is really interesting. It's concerning because no one's talking about it. But at the same time, it's a very interesting space. And, my curious mind goes, why? What makes it so interesting? What makes Singapore so special or susceptible to being the source?
Again, just the emphasis here, right? So because in the news, we always hear about, scam attacks, victims, right, of cybersecurity, be it, ransomware, whatever that is, right? But your emphasis here is actually the source of attack comes from Singapore. And this could come from our typical, internet provider like Singtel and StarHub and DigitalOcean, which is kind of like a cloud SaaS service. So maybe let's understand why. Why Singapore? Why Indonesia? Why Vietnam? Because we always associate cybercrime with, top countries like North Korea, China, like US, and things like that. So why Singapore specifically, or these 3 Southeast Asian countries which seem harmless?
Yeah. So I think the key point of clarification here is, even though that's where the attacks are being launched from, it doesn't mean that there's a huge crime community in Singapore of hackers. They are all controlling things and attacking from Singapore. But this is the launch points for the attacks. And also, again, specifically, a lot of these attacks are DDoS attacks at the moment, which means that it's a distributed denial of service attack, which is kind of coordinating hundreds of thousands of devices to all attack one point at the same time, to disrupt them, to try and shut down the traffic, or to overload them. So that's one specific type of attack. Singapore is in that list because primarily, and this is my expectation, because I haven't interviewed a hacker to ask them, why are you doing this? I think even if I tried, they probably wouldn't get back to me. But my expectation is there's 2 reasons why Singapore is such an attractive spot to be a source of attacks. The first is capability. So since the 80s, the Singapore government has been very actively promoting information technology and information economy. Everything's digitalized. There's a lot of services that are online, paperless society. Since, for the last 40 years, that trend has been consistently growing, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. What that means is that everyone has access, everyone has multiple devices, and everyone is used to having that connectivity. One key example is, if you look at even for lower income households, it's almost like a minimum basic standard of living now. Even for very, very low price, you get high speed fiber access. A lot of countries around the world, you don't get that benefit because fiber is, gigabits per second, right? Compared to early dial-up, which is a very, very tiny fraction. So capability is one big factor. The other one is Singapore is generally quite a law-abiding society. So people are very well aware of following the rules and are well respected in the international community for being that law-abiding society. And one of the examples I use is, if you look at the passport, Singapore is one of the best countries in the world where you get to travel to many countries visa-free. So the reputation and international standing there and expectations of safety, Singapore is a really good spot for that. Now, unfortunately, if you are a cyber criminal and you don't have to worry about the rules, and you have access to the country, that also means that as a country, this is a really good spot to be attacking from, right? This is my guess, my expectation, my hypothesis. So that's why I think from the statistics that you've seen or that Cloudflare publish, it's not one specific spot, it's across the entire country. If you look at where all the attacks are coming from, it's people's houses, it's servers, it's anything that you can get your hands on. I think the other thing I was going to mention as well was there is a bit of a consumer culture to buy fancy new devices that are, internet connected. I don't know how many devices everyone has in their house now, average 20 to 40 internet connected devices. But now you've got washing machines, you've got fridges, robot vacuums, security cameras. This is the extra stuff on top of your routers, your smart TV, your smart speakers. There's just more and more things that are being built with IoT and smart technology into it. I mean, it's just going to grow. The attack surface is just going to keep growing.
Yeah. I still don't have any counts of how many smart devices or IoT devices in my house. Right? I guess the last, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years, IoT has been booming, right? So we can even see like doors, controlled by internet now, lights, whatever that is at home. I think people increasingly, having these smart devices. And I think you point out about we have this culture, like always wanting new devices, new gadgets, new toys. I think that probably one aspect that drives, this, source of attack, right? But specifically, I think still we haven't answered the why, right? Because, okay, Singapore is well connected. We have good internet bandwidth. People have so many devices. Are you now saying that we are all being hacked?
Probably, yeah. Quite frankly, if I looked at the statistics now, one of the last publicly known ones, a botnet that was recently revealed to be, I think, the largest active botnet right now. They counted over 700,000 devices attacking at the same time. It hit 30 terabits per second. If you think about what that translates to, it's like downloading all of Netflix within minutes.
Wow.
That's a massive amount of volume.
Yeah.
And again, if you just law of averages, if you take the total volume of the attacks and you break them down to the countries and the sources, I think I worked out Singapore was probably about 2% of that. So if you think about how many households there are here, 1.5 million households, 2% is quite a lot. And that's just one botnet at one point in time that could be identified. It's not hard. So personally, when I've gone around to people's houses to see what's on the network, I've already found houses that have been compromised. So either the device has a backdoor or has already been hacked and people haven't really not paid attention to it or realized it. One of the hardest things to do from a maintenance and admin point of view, unfortunately, is actually to see what's on your network. It's not hard in the sense of having access to your router. It's hard in the sense of thinking that you even have to do it and then you just want to connect to something and just leave it and you forget about it. The natural tendency, as I said earlier, is that for humans, we just want to plug it in and have fun with it, but you forget that actually everything that you plug in has to be maintained. One big learning that I had in the last 10 years or so was that physical things have an end of life, devices have an end of life, but we don't really think about that. Because my speakers still play music when I expect it to, it still works fine. But really, it's probably already been hacked because it was from 10 years ago. Yeah. Recently, actually 2 recent examples, D-Link, which are a very big brand for routers, just a few days ago, someone reported that there's a vulnerability that can be hacked for a device that was launched in 2017. So it's not that long ago, 8 years ago. It was discontinued in 2021. It was a high-end router, but it's now very hackable. And they've also said they're not gonna fix it. So people who have those routers, they're not gonna be constantly thinking about, I'm now exposed. Someone's got a master key to my house, right, from my router, and they can enter my network. Because it works, if I'm a user and it's still working, I don't really think about and consciously go out to pay attention to it. The recent one, and the other thing I also learned recently was the devices that we completely forget about. It's fun to set up, but if you don't find the value from it, you actually forget that it's connected to the internet. One of the unexpected devices that came up on my radar recently was a Thermomix. The Thermomix cooker. So it's Wi-Fi enabled. Someone's worked out how to hack it. You need physical access to the thermomix to actually hack it. I never thought that would be even a point of attack. Like, first of all, I don't know how many people that use the device still use it with the Wi-Fi, but it's one of those things where it has the capability, it's got the parts for it. If you're not constantly thinking about keeping up to date, maintaining it, managing it, then it can be used against you.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just now, when you mentioned it is used for DDoS attack, right? And DDoS attack is just like sending garbage traffic.
Yep.
Even it could be like ping or whatever, right? So it is very easy to just send from any device endpoints, right? So that's one thing. And I think this comes back to, like, even including me, right? Sometimes we put a lot of focus on our laptops, our handphones. I think those two are predominantly devices that we think is the most susceptible and our golden source, right? And we have so many other devices. I'm pretty sure many people don't even think of updating the firmware, because it would even took a lot of effort to just go to the settings, update the OS, because it doesn't do that automatically, right? Yeah. Unlike maybe your laptop or your handphone, it will just auto update and you just trigger yes, right? So I think this brings an awareness for us as common people, I guess, to actually now think that we have so many devices at home that are probably prone, especially if we buy it a long time ago, the firmware is not updated, and even the provider has stopped providing the patches, right? So I think now we can kind of like map a little bit. So when we think about this now, right, what should we do? So I guess this maybe come to your Otonata, right? The things that now you're doing, right? So yeah, how do we know that we are being hacked or not hacked?
I think in most cases, it's hard to tell. So I think one of the challenges with network devices is that if someone broke into your network, it's different from someone breaking into your house, even though there are a lot of parallels, right? And this is kind of where I started for myself as well, because I was concerned about home security, and I had security alarm systems, I had sensor lights, I had enough indicators to tell me if my security is compromised. But then I realized that my network is a whole different ballgame, because if someone broke into the home network, it's like they have access to your house, but you don't know that they're there. It's a bit like, I don't know if you watched the movie The Invisible Man. It's very freaky if someone is standing behind you, but you don't know them, and they're there 24/7, watching everything that you do. They have access to everything that you have. It's a scary thought, but it's a good parallel compared to your physical security. This is your network security. How can you tell? There are a few indicators of compromise. One of the ones that I find kind of anyone can do is look at your router and see what the traffic is. Firstly, see what's connected on your network. Most modern routers should show you everything is listed on the network. If something looks a bit suspicious, as in you don't really recognize or you can't find it, you go around everywhere, maybe it's your washing machine, maybe it's the fridge, I don't know. But you can't find out what that one device is, and it's sending data and it's connecting, that's the one you need to be concerned about. Second one, similar to the router, is check your firmware, right? As what you pointed out. Age is a big factor, a risk factor. If you've got a really old router, chances are someone's already found a way to hack it and has published it. If you haven't updated the firmware, or in some cases, you can't. You're not allowed to update the firmware. I've had quite a few routers in Singapore, unfortunately, where it's convenient to keep the router because you've set up 50 devices on your Wi-Fi. You've signed up to a new ISP. ISP is giving you a router, but I don't want to have to reset up all the Wi-Fi again. Yeah. I'm just going to use the old router. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the firmware is fixed to a much older version. I've now physically forced quite a few routers of clients to forget the ISP version and follow the manufacturer's version, but it's so much effort to try and do that. So firstly, you need to know about it, and secondly, you got to put in the effort to break out of that. So one, check what's on your network. Two, if you can, make sure the router is reasonably up to date. The third one goes back to the first point. If you've got anything suspicious, so you mentioned my business, Otonata. We've now got something called a hack check. It's a free service. Basically, you take a photo of a device. If it's something that you're a bit suspicious about, we've now got AI to help you recognize what the device is, and then also run it through our vulnerability database. And what that means is it will look through, for that device, any known publicly disclosed vulnerabilities. So Unfortunately, the database is now over 300,000 lines of products. But basically, we can tell you that, hey, this product there's a risk of it having been hacked before for different reasons. The worst one is what's called RCE, remote code execution, where it's not just the mobile phones and the laptops, right? Smart TVs, especially old smart TVs, they've got a lot of processing power. Because if you think about something like running 4K and processing a 4K signal, it actually takes quite a bit of power. But if you've got an older TV that hasn't yet been up to date, I think the biggest risk we find are 1, age, 2, things which have good processing power, but 3, if it's, how do I put this? It's a dubious brand, a no-name brand. So sometimes you get OEMs that have kind of cobbled together different parts and a screen from here, a processing board from there. Those are typically the ones where we found that there has been more cause for concern. I'll tell you a funny story, but before I got into cybersecurity, one of my friends was very proud of the fact that he bought a media player from a very small shop that was $50, but you could access everything. So I was like, I understand business enough to go, you're not making money for $50. You have access to pirated movies, streaming from IPTV all over the world, and it's $50 for a lifetime? It reminded me of a quote that if you can't work out what the product is, you are the product. So it occurred to me much later on that you paid them $50. Their job is to feed you with dodgy content, but they've got access to your house. You are the proxy. You are the service. Doesn't matter. The $50 doesn't matter anymore. They're selling access to your network to be able to access the rest of your network and your devices in your house. So yes, while your laptops and your mobile phones are the ones that you automatically think about, if you expand that to just go by the processor, your network connection, storage, power, your home could actually be a computer, right? Just split out over different things, distributed computing. Your neighborhood could be a computer. And when you think about how connected everyone is from a Wi-Fi point of view, there's actually now, they found another form of attack called nearest neighbor attack, whereby rather than attacking a target directly, they attack the neighbor, compromise that network, and because it's Wi-Fi distance away, 24/7, they're just checking every single door they can until they find an entry point in. So I find that in Asian countries, and this goes back to one of the hypotheses for why Asia is a hotbed for sources. My hypothesis is because everyone's so dense within Wi-Fi points, it's going to be quite easy for someone to work out how to attack one location, find Wi-Fi around the area, use that to attack someone else's house, use their resources to attack the neighbor, and the neighbor, and neighbor. So daisy chain the attack. When I do a scan of where I am now, in a 24-hour period, the Wi-Fi around me, I get over 800 points. So if you think about it, it's almost like someone trying to break into your house. There's 800 doors to choose from, and you can do it 24/7 because it's distributed computing, right? Once you've broken into someone else's house, there's zero opportunity costs. All you need is an AI-written bot to work out how to best maximize that location to attack everybody else. So I find it really interesting. There's a lot of vectors. It's whole new cowboy territory. There's a lot of vectors that are now going to be AI augmented as well, because researchers are finding more and more new threats that even kids are getting into it. It's kind of disturbing, but the barrier to entry for hacking now is super low.
Right. I think you just open up a lot of things, right? So obviously there are many interesting things that we can pick, right? So the first thing, I think, just to summarize, right? For us at home, please try to first figure out what networks are being used. What device are being connected to your network, right? See if there's any device that you don't know, the traffic is a bit suspicious, right? And first identify that, check the firmware, use your tool. I believe it's free, right? Available online. Yeah. And I think we can just take a snap and upload it, and maybe it can tell whether there's a risk or not.
Yeah.
When you mentioned about the media player, in fact, today I read an article in Krebs that says Android media player, the typical thing for streaming, right? Is actually vulnerable for such things, right? So if those of you listeners who actually has this kind of device, that will be also one thing that to be suspicious about, right? So think about the repercussions of continuing using the device. Okay, let's say we have mapped it out, right? So, but one thing I would like to understand, this is also for layman people to understand, right? So where does the attacker actually come in the first place, right? Because we have so many devices, router is one, right? We have smart TV, we have maybe fridge, whatever that is. How does it actually go inside? Which point of attack typically is the most vulnerable? Yeah.
So I think the two most likely sources are either one, your compromised IoT device, which is typically your media player, even your printer, and the other one's going to be a router. And like I said, I think as long as there's a sufficient powerful processor in that device, and it's able to be compromised to get to RCE, running code, that's when it's going to find everything. It's doing everything else that a hacker would want to do, which is look around for the network, look at what combination of devices that you have, and then work out what's the next best spot to jump into. So that's called lateral movement. If you look at the diagnostics of some of the larger attacks by the more state-sponsored, those really powerful APTs, that's really what they're looking for, lateral movement and persistence. Because what they want to do is be able to, they don't just break in and then they're going to steal everything. It's not like robbing a bank. They want to hide there because they want to use that to leverage into something else. And there have been a few big cases, quite well-known cases where, for example, in Medibank Private, which is a private health insurance, the government took 2 years and they worked out what actually happened. The database administrator's home PC got hacked, and they found the passwords that he had for the database. Over 3 months, they just slowly tested it and went, oh, we can get in, we can get in, we can get in. And they stayed inside the servers, downloading 500 gigabytes of data. This is personal medical information. So if you think about it in the home network, what they're really targeting for is movement across the network to see how many devices they can compromise, and then staying inside the network and using that. And that's what the persistence is. You kind of expect that your laptop is safe, especially Macs. Like there's a reputation for Apple being very pedantic about security, but even now you can see that if you just Google 0 days, right, you'll see that even Macs get compromised as well. No one is completely protected. Like there's enough incentive for hackers to want to target Macs because of their reputation and because people expect to be safe. But unfortunately, the reality is it's still software, it's still computer, it's still made by people. And now worse, with one extra computing resources and AI, it's even easier now to customize a target and what's the best way to attack the target based on what they have. So that lateral movement is one of the things that they're typically going for. And DDoS is just an easy thing to do once you compromise the network. What they're finding now recently is that the hackers are using people's houses and monetizing them. So there's a term that really disturbs me now. It's called residential proxy. It's almost like giving renting out someone else's network access to someone who wants to hide the information in the news. If you look at, in the Singapore context, there are very strong laws around loaning out your SIM card. You get in a lot of trouble, right? And it's because your SIM card is then used to commit crime, scam other people. And going back to that whole reputation in Singapore being law-abiding, when you see a number that's a trustworthy number with a 65, you kind of expect, they should be protected. In that same context, the internet connection doesn't have any of that. Right? Unfortunately, if someone else is renting out your home network connection, the people that want to use that to hide whatever they're doing can have all sorts of different reasons.
What are typical use cases that people are doing with this residential proxy?
So at the moment, what the family-friendly version is fraud, unfortunately, which is looking like the traffic is coming from somewhere else. There's much scarier things that people, because they're renting it on the dark web, there are much scarier things that people can rent them out for that are not family-friendly. When you think about pornography, the darkest things in the dark web that you don't want people to be seeing that you're accessing, that's where residential proxies are becoming a service. So hackers are compromising it, and they've gone from botnets, which are a bit more volatile, to trying to come up with more stable, sustainable, they call it sustainable sources of income, which is to rent out other people's houses. That concept really disturbs me because these people don't even realize that they're being sold as a residential proxy. And it's the people that bought the $50 media player that went, oh, I'm getting all this great content, but they're actually now part of, but it's, I don't think we've seen enough, I don't think there's enough cases yet where someone has been taken to court or arrested because their network has been compromised to the extent that they're being used to facilitate a really bad cybercrime, but it's not implausible. If your bandwidth is really great because you really like online gaming, for example, and there's a whole bunch of traffic that happens after you've gone to bed, I don't know what the liability, where the liability falls, but if it's a SIM card, it's very clear. You're the one that let your access out, but home networks, I don't think we're quite clear on that yet.
Yeah. And even like it's very distributed, right? Again, like it's very hard to trace actually how the traffic goes in the internet, in well-connected internet devices.
Yeah.
And again, just to remind people, if you buy this kind of media player, be cautious, try to check further. You mentioned something about password, right? Again, I want to understand the root cause, how these attackers can actually go into your internet router or your, I don't know, media player, printer and all that.
Yeah.
Is password, like weak password, the typical way they hack in, or is like open ports, or is there any other thing that they do?
There's no, so in the, I'll come up with I'll go backwards a little bit in the context of what I do in terms of the service that I provide.
Right.
What I try and do is I look at how someone would compromise your network and use it against you and then protect from that. And what that means is the service that I do is, it's almost like going to your house, looking at all your doors and windows and going, that one, you've got a rusty lock there, someone's going to come in and break in. That one's big enough that one, I know this brand of door or door lock. It's been broken into lots of times.
Yeah, okay.
So the network version of that is going into your home network. So I've got devices that actually plug into your network. I'll do an initial scan to do an inventory, right? If I'm a corporate IT person and I take over the responsibility of the IT assets for a company, that's the first thing you do. Do inventory and look at all the things that you have. Then one by one, I will test the vulnerabilities on that device. So going back to what I said earlier, we've got over 300,000 lists of items.
Yeah.
They are known, they're published. One of the, it's a double-edged sword. One of the ethos for vulnerability and security research is that when you find a way to hack something, you tell the manufacturer and you give them a chance to fix it. Unfortunately, not every manufacturer will fix it. Not every manufacturer cares. And in the meantime, until it's resolved, this information is public. It's known. So like I said, with the D-Link example, they already said they're not going to fix it. But what that means is the instructions for how to hack it are on Google.
Oh, no.
Right.
Okay.
So and like I said, the list of the database that I have, it's growing exponentially. But the service is basically to look at the devices that you have, and then based on the vulnerabilities that we can test, we'll test them and tell you this is how someone will hack into your network, and this is what you need to do in order to prevent that. In the context of what you're asking around what's the most common way? The most common way that if I'm a hacker and I'm hacking a house, is to actually look at what device that you have and check the internet. Because it's been published, because that actual device has already had a publicly acknowledged way of accessing that, and it's got instructions.
Oh, wow.
Right. So, unfortunately, based on that approach and that ethos, once you break into a network, it's not hard to work out how to then take advantage of that. Easy passwords it's a no-brainer. It's almost, there are tools that you can go online to actually see how challenging your password is, and that's one of the things I recommend people do as well. Try password strength tester. Being a child from growing up with technology in the 80s, you used to come up with a password that was easy to remember. Unfortunately, it's like trying to have a piece of paper as your front door. It's completely useless. People just charge through because brute force and distributed computing makes it so easy. So it's almost like you don't even want to talk about the simple passwords, the weak passwords being a factor, because that's already a given. You need to not have default passwords and simple to guess passwords. Unfortunately, in the clients that I've seen, it's still happening a lot. Admin. I don't know how many devices I've seen where the username and password is admin. What we're finding now as well is even with what looks like random passwords, security researchers have now found that a lot of hardware, even though it looks like a random password, there's actually an algorithm to how they create that random password. So unfortunately, even with a modem router, it looks like it's really weird and randomized. One of the cases was a researcher found that it's based on the MAC address. Because again, it's designed by a person. It's not, they had to come up with a way for them to scale it up and to make it within a scalable process, and therefore that's the algorithm they use, and someone worked out, I can reverse that and I can find everyone's password. So there's no one way, unfortunately, there's no one way to protect. You got to think about the flexible approach, right? So it's one cybersecurity terminology is called living off the land, whereby if I can't bring anything to the party and I can only attack this way, what can I use? What resources do I use within that space to be able to? You have to be creative, right? If you're a hacker, to just it's like breaking into a bank with only a backpack or your watch. It's almost like a MacGyver thing. Yeah, exactly. But the problem is now you have AI. AI can scrape everything, can search all this other stuff to help you. So yeah, passwords is like you don't even want to talk about it anymore because it's like minimum, a very, very minimal standard. Don't use default passwords, change your default passwords. And even on things like security cameras, it's very common for security cameras because you feel like it's a physical device plugged in, but you forget that actually it's probably streaming video somewhere else. So a lot of times, some of the passwords are actually baked into the hardware as well. Brother printers, I think it was the motherboard manufacturers, unfortunately had a hardware password baked into it.
Wow.
There's something like 6,000 different models of various printers that all have the same flaw, and you can't fix it from a firmware update because it's built into the hardware. So it's cases like that where you have to do what you can with the password, but it's not going to be bulletproof either. There's no one tried and tested way where hackers will keep going. They're going to be creative based on what you have. And unfortunately, they're going to use that against you.
Wow.
So on that, what I try to espouse is something called be the path of greater resistance. So in the cybersecurity world, there's something called defense in depth, where you want to not just have, that's where your multi-factor authentication comes in. You don't want to just have one level of protection, you want multiple ways of protecting. And even the home security, that's a common parallel. There's a story around a bear and chasing people in the woods. I won't go into that one. But basically, the idea is as long as you're a bit more difficult than someone else, you create a bit more resistance to being the easy target, you're already better off. That's right. So I don't know if anyone is unhackable. I don't know if anyone is, even Fort Knox. I mean, if you've got enough resources, you can break into anything, right? Yeah. It's just a matter of whether it's worth it. So it's a question of not necessarily trying to go crazy to protect a lump of coal. You want to find the right balance between what you have at risk and how much effort you put into protecting it.
Yeah. So first of all, it's like thanks for sharing all this. I think it opened up a lot of our minds, our eyes, right? The first is like the scariest part is like so many devices with outdated firmware that are publicly disclosed, in terms of vulnerabilities. And if the vendor, the provider doesn't patch it, it stays open, people can try it, even like you mentioned, the instructions are out there. And we all know now with like AI capability, you can just search and even try yourself, right? Hacking into others. Okay, that itself.
Don't try this at home.
That itself is pretty scary. Second thing is you mentioned about password, right? So I also realized when you talk about brute force, I think all these devices don't have something like a rate limiter or the ability to actually kind of like back pressure, like where people are attacking you with so many traffic, so many attempts, so many times, you will just let it, right, until it breaks. And if you use easy password, even default password, it's so much easy to just hack within minutes, I guess.
Yeah. The worst Wi-Fi password I found took 3 seconds. And this client was living on a very busy street. So I told him, if I drove by your house slowly, I would have broken into your Wi-Fi. That's how, it's 3 seconds. Unfortunately, like I said, if you grew up at a time where brute force wasn't a thing, rate limiting wasn't a thing, we're in a whole different world now where it's so easy. It's almost like, our phones are so much more powerful now than a full-size room computer was, 30, 40 years ago. But our culture and our expectations of technology are still kind of very backward. So absolutely right. Like if you think about what I said earlier with age being a risk factor, with the smart TVs, I don't know about modern ones. I would hope that there's some kind of cool-off mechanism, rate limits, where too many, you got the password wrong 5 times. Like you have it with your phone, right?
Yes.
The more you try, the longer it takes before you can try again.
I've never found one with any devices, actually.
Exactly. So I don't know if they built that, but again, going back to age, I almost guarantee you 10 years ago, a smart device would not have any of those because you go, no one's going to try and brute force my TV because I just want to put it on the internet. I want to make it smart and make it accessible.
Does it mean, is it possible now for you, because you mentioned like at one point in time you scanned there could be like hundreds of Wi-Fi networks available. Like I just bring a device, it could be just a mobile device. You just walk around and just stay for I don't know how many minutes and see if you can, wow.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk about it because I feel like people will get the idea to try it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the tools are there. It's not hard. And that's kind of what concerns me. We are in an environment where the technology and the capability is very, very far advanced for misuse. And the expectation and understanding of security is very, very, very far behind. It's just, the gap is just growing. It's already big enough for corporates. You read about how many enterprises are being compromised and hacked on a daily basis. There's nothing paying attention to the homes. And yet we know that from a DDoS point of view, they've already been significantly compromised. So that's why I find it interesting personally, because I'm going, how do I help people? At least catch up a bit to the corporate. I'm not saying be a corporate, to that extent, because even then, quite frankly, they're not keeping up to the level of threat. But take some steps, right? Be the path of greater resistance. Take some steps towards protecting yourself, and don't make it so easy because it's bad enough. The gap is huge enough as it is.
Coming back to that, right, like the path of greater resistance and also like the number of point of attacks that hackers could leverage, so to speak, right? But interesting enough for your service, right? You kind of like target a lot for C-suites, executives, right? High net worth, lawyer. You also mentioned in the very beginning just now that personal medical information could easily be hacked simply because they went in from your home network. So tell us this, like if you're part of this demographics or persona, so to speak, right? Should you be more concerned? And why attackers love chasing them?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about from an economics perspective, what's the incentive for someone to attack you? Quite a few times when I've had the conversation with people to tell them, hey, you're at risk, sometimes the response I get is, so what are they going to do to me? Like, what are they going to do? I don't have money in my bank, for example, right? And what I found is there's 3 threats that are quite common and more prominent in high net worth individuals. The first thing is they're attacking you directly, right? So they're going after you specifically, your assets, your financial assets, your digital assets. For example, bank accounts, right? If they can, I've known of cases where they've been able to spoof someone's bank account and shown them a screen that's not theirs and actually transferred the money somewhere else. Stealing passwords, stealing your family photos and holding that as ransom. I've heard of cases just this year where someone's C-suite person has had their entire digital identity stolen. So social media accounts, family photos, bank transactions, financial records, travel plans, all stolen and then sold on the dark web for identity theft. and the person didn't even know about it. So he wasn't even given a chance to pay a ransom to get it back. He was just immediately, his information was all sold and utilized against him. So you might be a target just by targeting you directly. The second other source that I've seen is, it's happened more I've seen in Australia, where it's tax fraud. So they file on your behalf. So they have enough information about you to file your taxes for you. It sounds convenient, but what they're doing is they're actually claiming a refund under your name. So they're getting very big chunks of the money out from the tax office. The last one I heard was $24,000 as a refund, and they get the money transferred to their own account, and then they disappear. But when you go to do your own tax claim, suddenly, oh, no, I haven't filed my taxes. I haven't done any of that. It's so much effort to undo that damage. I've got friends that lost sleep because they felt personally violated. But on top of that, just the admin to be able to undo that, and the loss to the tax office is quite significant. It's a very big deal. The third one is what I talked about earlier, which is access through you. So depending on what you have access to, C-suites are a very popular target because of the access to the organization. There's a lot more efforts at trying to protect them through, VPN, I've got friends who they do their internet banking on the work computer, and they do everything else on their home computer, keep all that separate. But it's because they are very big targets for leveraging their access. I already know of 2 people that have had their title, the office holder title, used against them, against the organization. So what that means is one of them was he was the president of a sports club. His email got spoofed to ask the treasurer to send money. The easy way to do that was to go online and look at all the office holders, because it's it's public information. It's called open source intelligence. Right. So C-suites are it's easy to see what they look like. It's easy to find out who they are, what organization they are, what their role is. And in more recent cases, and I'll show you some links, but CFOs, CEOs have been spoofed with deepfakes, with AI technology, to mimic them and provide instructions to, hey, transfer $25 million. It's me, I'm giving you the authority now on a video call in front of other deepfake members of the executive. And there's more reasons to be targeting a high net worth individual from an economic incentive point of view. Now, if you're a hacker just after a botnet, you don't need to put in all the extra effort, but you have a whole different model there. And quite frankly, that's why a lot of people that's why they've been so successful, because these people aren't really looking after themselves. So I'm focusing on the people that have bigger targets, but are also more willing to get help to protect themselves, because they know that they've got more at risk. If I had a magic wand and unlimited resources, I would want to try and protect everybody. But the reality is, you got the 80-20 rule. You got to work with the target that are more responsive, but also higher targets, until I can work out how I can scale this and make the umbrella bigger, and try and get, more people involved in looking after that. There's a similar parallel in what's happening in the US. A lot of infrastructure, city infrastructure, so water systems, for example, they run with operational technology that was really, really old. And what's happened is they've been hacked on a regular basis. But because it's such a fundamental service. I mean, imagine if you want to turn on the tap and there's no water. But at the same time, because it's so old and outdated, it's not fun, sexy to get into the industry of cybersecurity for water service. So they become really big targets. So there's a big community now in the US for white hat hackers to volunteer their time to go help protect their local water utility. Because without that community, that kind of community approach, there's no way to scale it up to be able to fit. And even then, they're only covering a small portion of it. They're not covering everybody. So very, very big target base. Very hard to reach everybody at once. I'm focusing on the people that are more susceptible, but also are going to be more willing to listen to, hey, this is how you're going to get attacked. This is how I can help you. And that's why I've targeted executives. Ideally, it'd be everybody, but it's a very big landscape at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's also very good awareness building, right? Because again, like we all like our gadgets, our devices, we just buy them, put it at home, we forgot about it, especially if you're these type of persona where you hold a lot of information, it could be medical, private, it could be your digital assets. I think these days a lot of people hack into, I don't know, either your browsers and they just took your crypto for whatever reasons, right? In this world these days, I think if you simply have a lot of these assets, right, I would say, just be mindful as well, and probably do take care about the security of your network, right? So with all this, right, how come in the news there's nothing at all mentioning about this? Because this is happening and it's widespread. And if you're saying that Singapore now is the top source country, why I've never heard anything about it?
That's an interesting question. I have actually had a chance to ask someone in the government before. The response wasn't what I was hoping for. But you're absolutely right. I think at the moment there's probably a level of concern, but not necessarily clear understanding of what to do about it. So just a few months ago, I think the Minister for Law called out for the first time threats from APT and calling out the country at the source. It's typically not in the culture for Singapore to be acknowledging.
I was curious about that. Why?
And calling it out unless it's like a really serious problem. What I think at the moment, unless there's a clear line between the damage that's being caused, like I said, with the SIM cards, it's probably my best example. At the moment, it's a lot easier to see that, hey, if I don't control the SIM cards and I allow people to take advantage of that and use that for illegal purposes, then that's when the societal response is to, okay, we need to clamp down on it, we need to deal with it. I don't think that's as clear-cut yet with the internet technology, and with so I think one, the attack is not so clear, and two, therefore the response isn't as harsh or as firm or as immediate and urgent. But when you can see the efforts that Singapore is working on at the moment, I think it's clear that they are very concerned about the effect on corporates and businesses, because that does link to the reputation of the country as well as being an attractive place for businesses. So I think it's a matter of time before, one, the attacks scale up, before there's more and more things that you can do with a compromised network, and then two, finding a strategy to be able to respond to that. I use vaping as a parallel. So when vaping started happening, there was a growing trend, growing popularity. It didn't seem like it was that big a deal until they started putting more and more things into it. They started getting more visibility around the problem, and it became very, very clear that, okay, we need a stronger response, and the government has then gone, right, that's it, zero tolerance, clamp down on it. I see a similar parallel to that with home cybersecurity. Unfortunately, the way the networks are working, it's harder to, unless you're China with a firewall, and even then people get around the firewall, it's harder to control things that flow in and out from the internet. It's not like it's a physical border. I think that's where, again, if the threat is not clear, and therefore the strategy for responding is not that clear, you have to, quite frankly, let things develop further and then see, okay, so how do they respond from that? But from my perspective, by that time, where we are, it's already we're already late to the party. So it's almost up to the people to try and take the personal responsibility to protect themselves. And quite frankly, it's almost going back to defense in depth. Even if you have a police post station near you, if you're surrounded by police stations, and if you're a security guard at your estate, it doesn't mean that you should leave your front door open. But when I say we collectively, you're so used to a protected, safe space that you don't really think about what people could be doing and how they could be leveraging you. It's to the benefit of the people using the networks and access and hacking. So it's almost like I just think that we're not yet there in the point where there's a very big, clear problem, but it's got enough fires and smoke to indicate to me that this is going to get worse.
One day, one day.
It's just going to get worse. So in the meantime, I'm going to try and help people be educated to be able to catch up and try and close a bit of the gap. But quite frankly, I expect the gap will still get bigger, especially with AI growing at the pace that it's growing.
How about the telco, the internet provider? They would have seen these traffics, right? Especially if it's being used for DDoS attack, I'm sure like you will see the kind of like the targets, right? The target endpoints goes to somewhere and in one go. Like how about them? Like can they actually try to mitigate a little bit?
And it's hard. So at the moment, when you look at the scale that they're attacking, it's within 14 seconds, for example. By the time the AI recognizes, oh, there's something going on, it's already over. But one of the interesting trends that you're seeing with DDoS attacks, they're actually attacking ISPs as well. So it's almost like there's a level of mischief in what they're doing as well. It's not always for commercial gain or economic gain. It's also sometimes they just want to piss someone off. So ISPs actually, if you look at Cloudflare and the setup they've got, because they're tracking where all the IP addresses are, they can actually tell the ISPs this is where the attacks are coming from. I actually want to talk to the ISP to go, give me a list of all the IP addresses. Every time I go to a house and I check, I can marry it out. I can tell you there's already a compromised device there. I just don't think at the moment the level of concern is warranting that for the ISPs to actually take that kind of action. But I feel like if, magic wand, that's what we need to be doing. We need to be going, tell me all the ones that have been compromised because attacks coming from there. I'll go send someone there and actually work out what devices, one or many devices, is actually contributing to this.
Right.
Because the footprints are there. That's the good thing in a way about the internet, right? Even though it's all interconnected and all digital, you should be able to see, if you can see it's coming to attack you, you can see where it's coming from.
Yeah, with the packets.
Yeah, so it's really around being able to trace and follow that. But yeah, we're just not in a position where, one, they've got the resource and the social urgency to deal with that. Like I said, if it becomes which I expect it'll become a bigger problem, like with the SIM cards, then yeah, you're going to put in more and more steps to try and deal with it. But also, if you look at the rate of growth of DDoS as a proxy, I don't think any country in the world is prepared to deal with the level that they're growing. The Isuru botnet that Brian Krebs was just discovering is hitting new records at like this year. They've gone from, I think it was 3.5 to now 30 terabits per second. Like the pace at which they're collecting devices and compromising networks is, I don't think any single government by itself can deal with that level of growth.
So if government, maybe now not the right time for them to act in, the ISP is probably also not the right time. So it's coming back to us now to protect ourselves, right? So thinking my head, typically in a corporate or maybe like we read in the news or some blogs, right? You would typically install antivirus, anti-malware on your laptop. In corporate, you will have like a firewall, put in place. Is there such thing that we can do to our home network as well?
I think the short answer is there's no one size fits all. Like I said, there's no one path that people are following. In the early days with viruses, it was a lot clearer, right? You would get infected through an email or you would get infected through pirated software. Like there was clearer vectors for attacks. Now with the level of technology and how everything is a lot more interconnected now, and again with AI giving you a very, very large range of access tools, is not as straightforward as that. I think that's where one of the philosophies that I push is can doesn't mean should. So you shouldn't just connect things. You shouldn't just buy it because it's got Wi-Fi. You shouldn't just plug it in and not add any value. I have robot vacuum cleaner. It sends a crazy amount of data to the internet. It's very frustrating that I know what it's probably doing. It's scanning on my neighbor's Wi-Fi. It's logging everything in my house and sending it to them. But I've kept it separate from the rest of all my devices. I get a lot of value out of having my robot vacuum cleaner run once a day, twice a day, because it keeps my house clean. So I get benefit out of doing that. My washing machine, on the other hand, is Wi-Fi connected, but I get zero value out of that. In fact, I'm probably the service of how the product. I'm giving them my product information. I've connected it as well because I wanted to not leave it open for someone else to try and connect to it. But I'm a lot more conscious around why I've connected it that way. So going back to what you were saying with the antivirus and the malware, there's no clear one-size-fits-all approach. What I try and challenge people to do is think about spring cleaning your network. Like look at all the things that you have at your network and go, do I actually get value? Does it improve my life to have Wi-Fi connectivity for this thing? If not, then either get rid of the thing or at least try and disable the Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, I've seen so many cases where people have connected things and forgotten about them to a point that even though they've been hacked, they don't even realize it. And because they haven't used it on a regular basis, it doesn't add the value. You forget that you are taking on the risk without the benefit. So it's all bad news, having that kind of connectivity. So yeah, unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Back in the day, it was just running antivirus, but now the amount of different threat vectors are significant. The best thing to do is try and reduce your attack surface and try and keep as little entry points for someone to access your house.
Speaking about value, it reminds me one typical device that people have that is always connected and is kind of like valuable for them, which is the network attached storage. This could be your hard disk that you can access from anywhere, right? Yeah. What should we do about it? We love it, we want it to be connected, but it also opens itself up for attacks.
And I think the challenge with network access storage is it's very attractive for multiple reasons.
Yeah, and typically we store like personal, exactly. Yeah.
One I've got in Australia, ASX 20, top 20 listed companies in Australia. I know one of them has been hacked before with ransomware on the NAS. I have several NASs as well. And one of the best targets, most attractive targets for ransomware because it's your digital assets. Yeah. I constantly tell people that if my whole house burned down, the only thing I need protected is the photos. Because you can't replace that. Yeah, you can replace everything else, your passport, your ID cards, certificates, whatever, you can get reprints. But you can't get the photos back. So it's a very, very attractive source. Unfortunately, going back to what I said about distributed computing, it's got a processor, it's got a storage, and it's got a network. It's
got your asset as well.
Yeah, so it's a great target. And quite sadly, I've seen quite a few NASs now that when I run this vulnerability scan to them, because it's so attractive, going back to what I said about the ethos, it's constantly being hacked and new vulnerabilities are being found all the time. One of the key things that people have to be doing is checking whether the firmware has been updated for NAS. Right? That's one of the. Keep in mind that it's a gold mine. Like NASs have been found to be mining crypto because they're on there 24/7. They're constantly worrying, and you just don't know what's happening. It's been very popular. Trend Micro have something called a zero-day initiative where they reward hackers competitions for hacking the NASs. QNAP as technology have been very, very popular. And there's a Singapore company, I'll call them out on this podcast, Star Labs. They've won what they call Master of Pwn, which is, there are a few competitions every year. They won the one in, I think it was Berlin, I think, earlier this year, where they've successfully shown how to hack into things. So going back to what I said before, the workflow for security researchers is to hack into something, is to share the information with the manufacturer and then make it public, but ideally giving the manufacturer time to patch it. Yeah. This happens a lot with NAS. It's 2-3 times a year, this happens.
Wow.
So if you have a NAS, absolutely take extra precaution with it. Check that the firmware is updating, up to date. If it's old and it doesn't update anymore, get a new one. Unfortunately, Christmas, go shopping. But at the same time, be aware that it's a very attractive target and just do the hygiene, like the digital hygiene that you need to. Don't hold things that longer than you need to, right? Because it can be used against you.
And it's typically harder with NAS because as you accumulate your data, your files, right, and to migrate it to something else. When you have terabytes, for example, you have terabytes of data.
I literally, in my bag right now, I have a hard disk to put in the NAS that I just bought an hour ago. Because I'm actually doing that. It's outgrowing the capacity, so I just bought a 16 terabyte hard disk. Right. But yeah, absolutely. So once I do that migration, it's part of the lean methodology that I apply to my process as well. Along the way, if you don't need to hold, if it doesn't add any value to it, get rid of it. It makes the migration easier, but it also reduces your attack surface. If you don't have too much clutter and complexity, going back to some of the learnings that I took away from the corporate world, it just makes your life simpler, having less things to manage, because it's really fun to buy the new thing, plug it in, and get that 30 seconds of enjoyment. but the risk that you take on for leaving it there and not tidying it up, it just grows over time. And I've already found NASs in my circles, scanning, that have been compromised. And the disappointing ones are finding where people know that they should have updated the password or changed the password and they haven't. And I show them, this took 30 seconds. Like, you're so close to, if you haven't been hacked already, you're so close to being hacked.
Yeah.
It's disappointing because when you, like I said, the value that I place on my digital assets is significantly high, so I want to take effort to protect it. But people don't realize how easy it is for the NAS and how attractive it is to be hacked.
Yeah. I guess one of the main reasons why people don't want to change password is like they might forget the password, they don't know how to create strong password, and that's why I think using password manager is like, maybe it's like a must these days. Like if you have a password manager, it can help you to kind of like first create a strong password, second is kind of like save it, right, so that you can get access to it from time to time.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I strongly recommend as well, password managers.
So I want to touch on a bit about AI, right? So now we know about all these possibilities, the attack factors, the potentials that you can do, right? Because I think it can be lucrative for someone who start going to the dark side and knowing about potential of this. And now with AI, kind of like, I would say superpower for them to kickstart doing this. I want to understand the scale. How much has it really been in terms of increasingly hackers learning from AI and using its capability to actually starting becoming like a hacker?
So I don't think it's that obvious yet, but from just tools that I build as well, I use AI for coding, for understanding. Like I said, if I'm trying to think like a hacker, if I'm trying to replicate what they're doing, I'm gonna be trying to use the tool to protect as much as I can for good. But it's also very easy to go the other way because in a way, as far as AI is concerned, I could just as easily be a hacker, someone trying to break into someone's network, because I'm asking it questions that a hacker would be asking it, which is, you look at firstly, what is this? What device is this? Is there a known vulnerability that can use to attack it? And if not, for this type of device, what are the most common ways for, it doesn't have to be this brand, doesn't have to be, but if there's a common component, if there's a common combination of components, if you think about the range of things you can ask an AI, you can ask it many, many different ways of what's the best way to attack this device. It's not clear yet. Like I said, and as I mentioned earlier, Anthropic's recently reported that they believe that the resources are being put towards nefarious users for hacking, and by creating autonomous hacking agent. It's not even someone querying anymore. It's someone using AI to work out how to hack everything else, setting up an agent. So it's a double-edged sword. What I'm trying to do is use the positive side of that sword and the AI to go, how do I help? How do I help rather than hurt? But as far as AI is concerned, it's the same query, it's the same skill set, right? You're asking it how would someone hack it in order to protect it? They're asking how would someone hack it, full stop, right, to be able to get in. But it's the same skill set. And I think, weirdly, one of the things that was being reported as well was going back to the residential proxies. Apparently, there are LLMs who are using the residential proxy to get around scraping rules. So it doesn't look like they're the ones scraping. So I don't know how much of that is traceable back to the LLM. But it kind of makes sense when you think about it, right? Because they want to hide the activity and get as much data as they can, but not showing that it's them. So they go into people's houses and using the houses. It's a bit like Black Mirror. It's like Black Mirror kind of stuff. It feels very warped to be talking about it or thinking that that's what they're doing. But the reality is, if it's on the network and you can't tell, they can get away with it. It's hard for them to, they don't, as long as they keep quiet about it, you can't tell that it's them doing it. So AI is introducing new complexity, new challenges to cybersecurity, but it can also be, I believe that AI for everything, in the sense that it's a double-edged sword, right? You can use it for good, or you can use it for harm. So I'm focusing on trying to leverage that for good, but there's a lot of options for attacking. some of the recent cases, they're just teenagers. Teenagers are bored. They're just being teenagers, but they have access to crazy resources now with AI. Some of the best known ransomware gangs are run by teenagers. It's Scattered Spider is one of them. The other one was that, like I think I mentioned, 17-year-old kid that was arrested in the UK for hacking into a childcare network. They just, it's crazy. I mean, if you think about 40 years ago, teenagers wouldn't even have access to, a fraction of these resources. But now you can ask ChatGPT, you can ask Gemini, you can ask Claude. It's crazy.
And again, I would imagine the lucrativity of this activity, right? Because like increasingly we have digital assets, increasingly we are well connected, increasingly there are so many devices that potentially kind of like lure you into, hey, please attack me, please attack me. I think that might be one of the reasons why, a lot of people trying out, right? And if they didn't get caught.
Yeah, I haven't really met a hacker to ask but I've heard enough stories, and you're right, it's very lucrative. One of the most disturbing ones I heard was an interview with a ransomware negotiator. This is a corporate one, but he was negotiating with a guy who attacked a children's ICU unit. Wow. The hacker knew what he was doing because he was threatening to disconnect the life support for the child and kill the child. And he wanted to do it for money. He just wanted the money. When you think about how much technology now has, operational technology, right? So outside of the home environment at the moment, but on the way here, I was just looking at LinkedIn where Singapore is now talking about cybersecurity standards for lifts, for smart lifts.
Wow. Okay.
And it just suddenly blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I never thought about that. Like, can you imagine if you're being held hostage in an elevator in the hospital when you're trying to get to someone? That's crazy. So we don't recognize how many different things are now at risk, let alone in the home environment where you want to feel safe in your home. You want to feel like your things are protected. But like I said, it's like Invisible Man. There could be someone watching you all the time, 24/7, and they're not even watching you. They're hiring an AI agent to watch you until you do something that they are interested in, and then they'll come and pay attention. It's not great, but it is the state of the maturity of the society at the moment. We are very immature in the sense of cybersecurity, but we are also, on the other side of the scale, very, very connected, right? So I feel like that's an area of vulnerability.
Well, again, this conversation itself is really, I would say, insightful, at least for me, right, to open up my eyes. And I'm sure many people here, if they listen, they understand the level of, how shall I say, the level of risk that they are exposed to. I think hopefully, they can do something, right? So maybe that's also the time for you to say a little bit of words of Otonata. What can you provide to people if people want to find how to get help, right? Because I'm sure many people are kind of like clueless. Okay, now what? I need to do so many things.
So I've got a website, Otonata, OTONATA.com. It's inspired by Otonata, which is a dragonfly, and it's a silent bug hunter, which I like the imagery. But basically, there's a service from the website I call Hack Check, which is, like I said, you could take a photo of your device, and it might not necessarily recognize what the device is because there's millions of them, but it gives you a chance to put in the brand and the model number. And what we'll do is we'll scan the database and give you a very quick response. So that's kind of the one of the easiest things you can do in terms of understanding, or at least even if you're mildly curious about your device and whether or not there's a known vulnerability, try it out because it's pretty easy and it's free. But if you're more serious about wanting to, I guess, get your risk profile clearer and understand what you actually risk, we have a service that will send a device to your house. You just plug it in and we'll do a full scan for you. There's a much more premium version, which is I will go to your house and plug it in for you and tell you how to protect your house and actually help you configure your house to manage your risk. And I think that's one of the key things I took away from a corporate environment, which is it's all about balancing the risk, but we forget that the same principles apply everywhere, even at home. So it's a conversation about finding what you have at risk and then taking the right efforts to protect it. Because in some cases, some of the stuff is not worth protecting. If it's a D-Link router and you have a NAS that you really want to protect and secure. If it's an old outdated D-Link router, just get rid of it. Like it's not worth taking extra steps to protect against that if the solution is just to entirely replace it. What I find is that there's no one-size-fits-all formula, which is why the service has different scales. It can be as simple as telling you this is at risk, to telling you, giving you better visibility of your network, to actually helping you change and take all the steps that you need to protect yourself, because no one network is the same. I've never seen a house that has exactly the same configuration as another one that I've seen before. So the website gives you that simple health check, but also more about the service and what you can do. Typically, a scan takes about 2-3 days because it tries to look for all the devices in the network, and then it tries to, like I said, knock on every door, check every window to see whether something can be broken into. But the mitigation might take a bit longer, depending on what the issue actually is. It might mean having to redesign your network, because like I said, in some cases, I've seen over 50 devices on the network. I've got more than 50 devices on my network. And my network is segmented to manage my risk profile. So it's not always going to be the exact same solution for everybody. It's going to be, how do you want to live your life with your devices, right? How do you want to be comfortable with what you use? And this is the solution that would give you the best protection while still keeping it convenient. Because you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to go crazy having 3 locks on your front door, 2 locks on your window. Every time you want to open a window, you got to do magic tricks in order to do that, right? It's finding the right balance of risk. That's what Otonata does. It gives you very tailored advice around what are you trying to achieve with what you have, so that you don't have to worry about it. Like going back to what I said at the start, having a lot of small decisions to make can be very fatiguing. Unfortunately, when we accumulate devices, we sign ourselves up to the obligation of looking after all these things, but we don't do any of that because it's boring, it's so tedious. So I've taken my operational background and expertise, applied a more scalable process to managing it for you. The last part of the service is actually offline monitoring. So the starting point of the Otonata service is do an inventory of what you have, do a vulnerability scan of all the ways someone could attack you, mitigate what your profile should look like based on what risk you want. But after that, we've exited your premises, but I know exactly all the devices that you have. And what we can do is, as new information comes about from a vulnerability point of view, we can go, hey, you've got this device. Last week, it was established that this is how you would hack into it. We can tell you. So it's almost like I don't actually have to be at your house anymore, but I know all the stuff you have, and I'm proactively looking out for all your things. In supermarkets, there's recalls where if you bought a dodgy food item, right? They go, oh, you got to bring this one back. It's not safe for you to eat, etc., etc. No one pays attention to recalls for your devices, unfortunately, right? Firstly, no one even has recalls for devices because they want to keep it quiet. They don't want you to think about the brand being affected. But we'll do that for you because I've got it in the process. It's automated, it's scalable. I have hundreds and thousands of devices. I can check them on a daily basis. It's not something that I would expect anyone to be, today I got to check everything on my list, right? So that's what I've automated and taken away the fatigue of having those micro decisions. So it's really that step process. Having your inventory list built, doing a vulnerability scan, mitigating the risks, and then doing offline monitoring. And for me, like I said, that gives you enough protection to be more resistant. It's not going to be, I can't guarantee that you won't get hacked, but I can tell you that compared to 99.9% of the population, you're in a much better spot already just by doing these things.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, so very comprehensive. I'm sure if people would want to protect themselves better, they can check out your website, right, and maybe engage you. Is there any kind of like, I don't know, like good stories, good, like service that you did for us just to learn, be curious, like what kind of service that you have saved, for example, in terms of, big profiles or maybe those kind of stuff, if you can share?
At the moment, so because of my target audience, it's more discreet. That's part of what I bring to the table as well. I have worked with people who were embarrassed to have had vulnerabilities that were fairly basic. IT leaders who had admin, thought leaders. Like I said, ASX 20 CEOs that have had devices that have been hacked, that they didn't know about. I wouldn't share any direct stories. I think what for me it's more the amount of creative situations that have been, I guess, publicly disclosed even in the last 3 years. One I was just talking to someone about today was politicians being caught in compromising positions through cameras, IP cameras. So it's a bit scandalous, right? When you think about the people in high positions and being found dirty. But if you zoom out a bit further and you go, how did someone get access to that material in the first place? And does it mean that everyone has access to everything? It's quite concerning. So it's a bit juicy. Yeah, it's a good source of gossip, but it risks missing the point of how vulnerable we are as society.
Wow.
Right. So, like I said, when you hear the more serious cases around critical operational technology being compromised, it's very raw. Like people's actual lives are being affected. But at the same time, you got to zoom out and go, how do we stop this from happening to people we care about? Right. It's a bit distant when you see someone else being attacked and affected, but when it actually hits you, it's it's very concerning. So sorry, I don't have a juicy story to share.
It's okay. I think that's quite revealing enough for us to understand the kind of impact that we might get affected, I guess, one day, right? When this becomes like a more riskier attack factors, possibilities are more endless, right? So I think thanks for sharing that.
I was going to say, I think with the automation and if you project a bit further to what the trends are, with the Tesla robots, with the humanoid robots, with self-driving cars, I think once there's a much bigger overlap between the physical world and the digital world, and you can extend it to Neuralink, like how people's brains are going to be connected and wired up. That's why I'm trying to get the message out now earlier, because by the time we get there, it's not just going to be your digital assets that are at risk, it's going to be your physical well-being. I mean, they've already shown cars to be hacked while being driven.
Wow.
Right? So you extend that further. If you're not taking steps now to protect some of the basics, hygienes, when you get to a point of having a humanoid robot helper in your kitchen, or your self-driving car is driving you to work, you're going to set yourself up for a world of pain, because some of these basics haven't been embedded into your normal operation. You can't expect them to be covering every possible threat, right? So that's why I think we are not there yet, but given the trends of how things are converging with networked physical devices, it's going to get scary. So, as much as possible, start learning the basics to prepare yourselves for when, you've got a robot driving a car and your child to I don't know, whatever activity they've got, right? All of that is kind of susceptible.
Yeah. So probably now it's not enough to just understand physical safety anymore. Digital safety, definitely very important. And we should not just focus a lot on, identifying scams, these deep fakes, which is kind of like now the trends, right? But obviously, these kind of attacks is also one thing that throughout this conversation, I learned a lot. And hopefully people start having that awareness, try to do something, or even understand why all this becomes risky over the time as well. So I think thanks for sharing that. I know we've talked a lot. We've got only one question that I would like to ask you to wrap up our conversation. I call this the 3 technical leadership wisdom. So just think of it like advice that you want to give, maybe, pieces of wisdom that you want to share to the listeners here today. What would that be?
So sourcing from Lean, like I said, first one I will reiterate is can doesn't mean should. Like a lot of times we're not deliberate enough, or we get caught up with the shiny new thing that we don't really think about the value that it adds. Go back to Lean principles, 5S, clear out the things that you actually don't need to reduce your footprint. Reducing your footprint also means reducing your attack surface. A lot of times, quite frankly, I've still got devices that I know I need to clean up. I just haven't got around to it. But if you're not even thinking about it, then you're constantly going to be leaving yourself open for no benefit. Right? So can doesn't mean should. Like if that's the one thing, right, for people to take away from. But if you can also be more aware of your digital hygiene. So things that we access, things that we put up on the cloud, they're all our digital assets, our footprints. It's almost like having basic dental checkups. There are things that we take for granted as minimum standards of hygiene for ourselves, for our self-care. Think about that being applied to your digital life, right? So in terms of your data, in terms of your passwords, your admin, your router firmware, there should be a list of things that you need to be doing on a yearly basis, like you go to the dentist once or twice a year. There needs to be that level of self-care for your digital footprint, right? There has to be a level of digital hygiene. If you're not even thinking about it at all, you won't do any of that. Just put some thought and time into what should you do, and then create a process that gives you a reminder once a year, something. In Australia, they remind you to change your smoke alarm batteries when there's daylight savings. So there's a kind of a mnemonic around the relationship between time and having to do something. Right. Create something like that for your own digital hygiene, whether it's deleting your photos screenshots, for example, of information, like stuff like that, where you actually consciously go through cleaning up house every now and then. And like I said, thinking in mind around your cybersecurity posture is be the path of greater resistance. Even if you're not doing everything I talked about, even if you're not taking crazy steps to protect your house and your assets, do something that pushes you along in the distribution curve, right? It makes it a little bit harder than the next guy, because 700,000 devices right now on the botnet, those are already that's the easy stuff, right? That was people not doing anything about it and going, you know what, heck me, I don't care. Those are the people, you don't want to be in that group. You want to be in the ones that have a stronger password. You want to be in the ones that have paid attention to the firmware and made it a little bit harder, because then at least you're not as exposed, especially if you've got stuff to lose, if you're a higher net worth individual. Like I said, you don't want to lose your digital assets, your bank accounts, you don't have financial losses, you don't have emotional turmoil and losses because someone's compromised you. So path of greater resistance, whatever steps you can take towards being that, by all means, take a first step and see how far you can go. If you need help, give me a call.
Right. I really love that. Very, fit into the theme as well, what we discussed, right? So again, thank you so much, Joseph, for sharing all this. I think, again, this is a very good awareness session for all of us. If people love this conversation, they would like to connect with you, ask you more questions, is there a place to reach out?
Yeah, my website, Otonata, Otonata.com.
All right, so that's a wrap. So again, thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. That was fun.